Welcome back. We had some small technical issues where the line was dropped, but we are back with Mr. Paul James. You're there with us? Great to have you. With my first question, good afternoon to you as well. My first question is, I want to know what your thoughts are on the recent release of INEC's guidelines for the recall of elected officials. How do they align with YAGA's advocacy for democratic reforms?
Thank you very much. So I did a quick scan on the regulation as released by INEC yesterday. I tried to compare with what they had, the previous regulation. I think if there is anything new is the part around the deployment of technology and the use of beavers in the verification process. But I think what is even most important now is for people to even know of how to benefit from this opportunity. Maybe what has happened in the past is the lack of awareness or the lack of enough information about how people should go about the recall process. Now, if you recall, the last attempt to do a recall was in 2018 when the people of Kogi West attempted to recall Senator Dino Melaye. What had happened with that process was the fact that there were not enough verification. While the senatorial district have about 351 registered voters, 189 thereabout signed the petition for the recall, and then only 18,000 out of this were verified. And of these 18,000, if you put the total number together, only just about 5%. And so because of that, INEC couldn't go ahead with the process for the referendum. So, like I said, if this information is public, and if people understand what the processes are, I think it's going to be a very big game changer. Most importantly, I think it's also going to restore the culture of accountability, restore some sense in our electoral democracy, especially when the elected officials know now that the processes are there and they are clear, that their constituents know how to go about this process. What is cumbersome about this process is, for instance, that you have to get signatories to the petition that will either sign or thumbprint on the document for verification before INEC would then use the document as the basis or the register for the verification. Confirmation is always a challenge, like it had happened in the case of Dino Melaye. But if people are committed to this, what is required before INEC will go for a referendum is to just have 50 plus 1% of the people of the registered voters that are interested in, that will have signed the petition and also interested in doing the recall. So I think if that is institutionalized, if people know about how to go through the process, I think for me, it will create a lot of change in the culture of our election, and the politicians, I think, will take the people more serious, especially when they understand the power that the people wield in doing or engaging the recall process.
Good, Paul James, I was going to ask you what you just alluded to towards the tail end of that discussion. So, in hindsight, is the recall process in Nigeria fail-proof as it is now? Is it open to manipulation by the very individuals it is meant to address in the first place, you think?
So first, like I said, is understanding the process. A petitioner will petition the commission to recall an elected official. These people are members of the National Assembly or the State House of Assembly. So once they institute the process, the verification will happen. People will come forward to append their signatures or their thumbprint for that process to happen. While when there is a significant number of interests, INEC would then call for a referendum. A referendum now will be for every registered voters in the constituency. While the verification is just for the petitioners, referendum can only happen when you have 50 plus 1% of the petitioners that have come forward and their verification falls through. And like I had mentioned earlier, it may look challenging, but if people are truly determined to do that, people can really, really take advantage of that opportunity. And again, like I said, if the awareness is out there and people know how to go through these processes, then this is going to definitely be a very big changer. What INEC had done this time is in addition to the thumbprint or the signatures to the document, the other verification is now using the beavers to verify the permanent voters' cards or the respective voters that will have asked for the recall, the petition, that will have petition for the recall to happen. The same process will happen also during election. It's just like every other election. When the referendum happens, it will open from 8:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon, or when everybody on the queue had indicated whatever would be their interest for the referendum before INEC would then conclude the process. It will follow the same stage of from the polling unit level to the ward level before the final determination is done.
And Mr. James, given the current political landscape in Nigeria, how effective do you think this recall process is going to be in enhancing transparency and accountability among elected officials?
I think if the political awareness, like I said, is institutionalized, it's made public, we might not even get to that level. When people begin to understand the power that they have in their hands, especially from the candidate nomination process that happen at the political party level. Sometimes we may not be able to know the full character of an individual until they get elected into office and they begin to exhibit those things that people don't like. If these processes start, there was an attempt in 2018, although some of these processes could be politicized, just like we saw in 2018. It was just the case of the then governor and Dino Malaye. But again, as politicians who want to continue to exploit this, I think the advantage is more to the citizens. When they feel that they are not properly led, then they can begin to engage through this process and also see it through that their wishes and aspirations are carried through the process.
Very good. So is your group, Yaga Africa, creating that awareness on citizens' rights to recall and, of course, initiate a referendum towards bad governance, you think?
Oh, definitely. The very first thing we did when we saw the document yesterday is to begin to tease it out to see what aspect of this do we need to start pushing out. And like I said, a new thing, a new phase for us, especially with now the introduction of technology as another layer or level for the verification. At the moment, our interest is on the Edo election, but definitely after this, moving on from here, it is one of the ideas that we want to start pushing out for people to know how to engage through the process.
Now, Paul, you mentioned earlier in your response that the petition for a recall requires signatures from over half of the registered voters in a constituency. Do you think this is a threshold that's realistic, or does it potentially create a barrier to citizen-driven accountability?
Well, yeah, it could be both, but importantly, again, this happens when people don't feel whatever the option available to them at that point in time that is serving the intended purpose. And I think for me, if that is there, then truly it will institute the culture of the accountability that is expected. When people don't feel that the person that is representing them is doing enough of that representation, I think they will definitely want to go through that process and see to it that they get the kind of leader that they want or the kind of leader that they deserve.
The 90 days window for the petition to materialize, going from the process of verifying the signatures and, of course, the signatories as well, for that recall, do you think it's sufficient enough, to get people to initiate this recall and, of course, end incidents of bad governance?
I think that for me will also be very challenging, especially if you look at the number. It might work where you have maybe smaller constituencies with smaller number of registered voters. I think one of the fallout from the Kogi attempt was the fact that over 350,000, like I said, are registered to vote in the entire senatorial district, and to be able to go around and get all of these persons to come back for the verification was a very, very Herculean task. What they were able to pull at that point was just 189, while it is like more than 54% of the total registered voters. You see, there was also another challenge, the challenge of verifying these voters. I mean, if for verification as it is at the moment is just signature and thumbprint, what INEC had done, which I think could also be exploited by politicians, if it is just to gather maybe 150 signatures out of 300, politicians can manipulate that. What INEC had done this time is to add another layer, which is the verifying the permanent voters card. So I think that is even where it will be more challenging, because to be able to get all of these voters, recall people mostly just return to their constituencies or their polling unit around the period of election. And then because of this migration from the polling unit or from the location where people had originally registered to vote, I think it will still be a challenge, even as we continue to explore that opportunity.
And do you foresee any potential backlash or resistance from elected officials toward the recall process? How should such resistance be addressed just to continue to ensure the accountability?
Well, again, we'll go back to the era around training. Even for the verification, if you see at some point, because the accountability angle there, INEC want to institutionalize it. Individuals are called to also be part of that verification exercise, just to know. It is when you get to the second stage of the referendum that INEC officials are also involved, that serve as the officials that carry the referendum. The electoral officers for the local government, the assistant electoral officers are also there to provide that level of support. So maybe also, now that we have this, we also want to see that there is that intentionality on the part of the Commission to also mainstream that into their own processes by providing that level of training for their staff in the event that happens about how to carry out the exercise. It's not just about having the guideline, but also that people can internalize whatever are the provisions of the guideline to know how to apply them when the time comes. We shouldn't wait until we have people making those petitions before we begin to go to learn how to use or apply those guidelines. Maybe a very good opportunity for stakeholders, both CSOs, both INEC officials, to learn through the process and also, like again, we keep saying, provide that level of educational support to people about how to engage the process.
Yes, Paul, very good. Just before we let you go, when you gauge the mood of the nation right now, there's so much uproar and the way things are, and a lot of discontent, as it were. So how enthusiastic is the electorate towards the prospect of invoking recalls, especially towards bad governance, when it has been proven that certain individuals are probably culpable towards graft and all these corrupt vices? I'd like your thoughts on that. Are people actually happy to do this? Where we're coming from over time?
I think people will be more than happy to engage through the process if we provide them the opportunity. And the only way to provide them with the opportunity is the political education, the voter education they need about how to go through this. Once they know that this exists and how they can engage it, I think you are going to see many positions going forward. People are not happy, I agree with you, but again, it's also because people don't maybe understand the processes of governance. You have some elected officials that have abdicated their responsibilities so that you see them also delving into other things that are not their core mandate. And so because of that, there is duplicity of effort, there is even confusion about what they do or what citizens should expect. I mean, if you ask a citizen today, what do you expect from your representative, you begin to hear things that maybe another agency of governance should be the one managing. You have legislators now that are engaging in what they will call constituency initiative, providing palliative and all of that, and then relegating even their primary function of legislation or making laws. So because of this confusion, the demand on the part of the citizen is usually very high. So for even a citizen to make that demand, the citizen even ought to know or need to be educated to understand what the true functions of these representatives are. I think that is, for me, the starting point. So after knowing that, and if they have the feel that representatives are not representing their interests at that level of pushing for people-friendly legislation, then for me, I think that is the point where we'll begin to take up the recall concerns or the recall issues.
Very good. Paul James, Head of Election Program, IAGA Africa, would like to thank you very much for your time on Newsday.